I don't know. I think there should be something investigated, but I know very well the newspaper story is true.
No, they weren't sensationalists. Did your grandmother or grandfather say that maybe he was shot first?
No, they never said anything about him being shot at all. They never told me that. Now, he
apparently-
could have been.
Yeah, apparently he was mutilated.
Yeah. He was just, as near as I can understand, they just beat him and cut him and that sort of thing, and they just fought. And he must have been a rather large man. In all probability was, because most of the pioneers were.
Oh, yeah.
And he probably fought back, which he would expect him to do.
What they do, if I remember rightly, you said that they stalked him for about an hour and he sent his wife upstairs.
Well, when he saw them coming, according to my grandparents' story, he told her to go upstairs and stay there and not come down for anything. And they always thought that he knew who the people were, and they probably threatened him prior to this. And of course, that was supposition. But the other thing is not supposition. It's what they told him.
Well, it appears that he might have known who was coming, or he suspected who was coming.
Yeah. But he seen them coming. And it was in the daytime, I know that.
What room was it in the house? The basement?
Well, they fought all over the first floor there, as I understood.
Have you been in the Hertzler house?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, as I say, the people lived in that, so many different families prior to making the park out there. But the outer walls evidently are just about like they were at that time. Now, how much changing was done inside, I don't know. But I don't think the first floor has been changed, or not drastically. There may be little changes in it. Of course, I haven't been out there for the last couple of years, but. I did go out there and look at the place. In fact, I was going to give them an organ. I had one of the old-fashioned organs.
Yeah.
I wanted to put my grandfather's name and grandmother's name on it working there, and they kind of objected to that. But it was a good organ.
Oh,
why didn't they want it?
Yeah.
Why didn't they want it?
I don't know. They never called me back. I offered to go. Now, that's been a long time ago, though. That's been about 15 years ago. But it was a good organ. We'd play it.
You see, back then, the people that were in the Historical Society were not nearly as interested in history like they are now today.
Yeah.
They just didn't.
Well, this was an old-fashioned church organ.
What'd you do with it?
Yeah, made down in Cincinnati.
What'd you do with it?
Well, I finally sold it to a friend of mine. He still got it.
What's his name?
Earl Jurgen.
What is it?
Jurgen. Y-E-R-A-N.
Oh, Arian's got it.
And he lives out on Turtle Road. You know, he's Secretary of Clark Hall.
Yeah, Secretary of Clark. Yeah, I know where the organ's at. Yeah.
But of course, it worked all right. That Lafferty kind of looked at it a couple times. I thought maybe that I might have him work on it, and he said that he would, but it played.
Now, it belonged to your grandfather?
Yeah.
The one that worked for Hertzler.
Yeah.
Ah, what?
I know they wanted us.
I know that too. Goodness.
Well, I love to fool around with it. I like organ music, and I mean real organs. I don't mean electronic. I've worked on electronic others. But you take these air organs, especially the one out in Salt Lake City, I don't think there's any other music in the world like that.
I love to go to Dayton and hear them play that organ there in Dayton at the temple. Oh, that thing will take you out of your seat.
That's right.
When they
Well, that
walk
wasn't
it
Salt Lake and that tabernacle. I'll tell you, that's where you go up on one end of the tabernacle and drop a pin here at the other end. The acoustics are all this world. Old Brigham Young really built something when he built that. But that organ, there's pipes on that organ over 35 feet tall.
You know the Central Christian Church down on Pleasant and Fountain Avenue?
Yeah.
That's got a pipe organ in it.
Yeah.
And they're moving that.
We had a good pipe organ down there at the temple, and not sold it.
Yeah.
They want electronic ovens. But all electronics are all right, but
they don't have the tone.
They don't have the carryover their air organ has. Well, that was a good organ down there, and somebody in Texas bought it, and they put it back together, and I guess it's a real showplace.
Yeah.
Down there. I think it's in use.
I don't know what's the matter with Springfield.
All this super history, and they don't seem to appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope I didn't mix you up too much.
No,
but
you know what?
you could sure check it over there for all the shacks.
Yeah. I'm glad. Oh, we got it all.
But it was all interesting. It was all interesting, no?
My grandmother was one of these people that, like the old Germans, they would cure diseases supposedly. So now I'm not going in for this witchcraft, but it was pretty close to witchcraft. Short growth. She'd go out and get herbs that she raised, and it would be for this thing and for the other thing. She wanted to learn me. Of course, the theory was they could only learn a male or female could learn a male, and a male learn female. And she and I were, well, we were just pretty good friends. She lived right over there. I was over there for the first time.
Was that Mrs. Sheets?
Yeah. Yeah, I've still got some of her peppermint out here back. I raised it for tea. But she raised a lot of herbs and that sort of thing. And
is this the one that worked for Mrs. Hudson?
yeah, she was just about the size of Francis, beautiful gal. Just like a cricket. Granddad was big Victoria.
Now, I'm a little confused here. I'm going to answer her question. The lady that worked for Mrs. Hertzler was her husband Henry.
Yeah.
And her name was Elizabeth.
What are you girls going to do?
Oh, we'll compile. You know, it would be fun to do a brochure on it.
I'll see if I got Oscar.
You know, if we could get to confirm all this, and see that Bible, it would be fun to take some pictures of that Bible, some of the things that, yeah, that it's at Oscar's. But if we could get some pictures of some of the things that are in there and maybe do a brochure or something, I think it'd be interesting.
Well, you know, they interviewed me for Kansas City, 3 calls over the phone. And the last one was that I had passed it down into well, I had decided that they had hired some people and experienced one if I had thought politics, yeah, and I didn't, and I thought I was it. I bought new tires for my car, and I was going
What do you mean?
well, you mean out, or the one we were,
She said you were interested.
oh, we were up at the Sioux, up at St. Sue Marie, and Cliff bought a pipe, an Indian pipe, about 20, 30 years ago. We went into an antique store, and they, you know, he went in and looked around, and the lady said, well, she said, there's things in those drawers over there. She said, pull them open and see what you want. They pulled open this one drawer, and here was this pipe.
I told you to travel left in the west. There's a picture of Zion Canyon. That's the good one.
So beautiful. We've had it for a number of years, and our one daughter,
But that,
her son got in Boy Scouts. And then,
well, these are,
she lives up
you
around
can tell by these trees up there how tall those are, or down here. In the Zion Canyon, you was down below looking up. Not like the Grand Canyon up above looking down.
So she said to her dad one day, she said, Dad, you
They're
still got the pipe?
fantastic.
I'd like to have
That's
it."
beautiful.
So she
Of course,
goes
those others are too.
to school children and different organizations that want her to come and talk to them about the Indians. Is that right?
That's also
so
Zion.
So gave it to her. He said, here, he said, take it and see what you...
Remember what, all of us down there was a white track in the middle of the street. There was no sewer sidewalks, there wasn't no paving or anything like that.
Isn't that? Huh.
Yeah. But the place is going to the devil, I don't have it.
Hey, now, listen.
That don't make any difference to me.
That's all right.
Well, I got you now.
We got it now. Your folks came into Enid?
Yeah, at Eden. About, as near as I can gather, it was about 1830. They came from, in covered wagons from Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Bucks County?
Yeah. This is pure rumor, what I'm going to tell you now. But our history goes back, we can follow it back to the war, and we think we're descended from the Hessians. And a lot of them just walked out in the woods and disappeared. And there's no reason for us to believe that that's where our ancestors didn't come from. They were German.
I thought that's
On the other side, of course, they were German too, but they came here about 1870. Oh, 1875.
Now, the
something.
Hessians, was that your father's side or your
That's my mother's father.
your mother's father?
Yeah. But where the Hertzlers came in, my grandmother's father ran a vineyard somewhere down, of course, this is supposition, but in front of the Hertzler house in Route 70, over near the Matter, that's where the vineyard was. They run a winery and a vineyard over there. And grandmother worked up what they called a big house. That was, of course, that was the only big house down there at the time. But anyhow, she worked there from the time she was probably 11 or 12 years old. And my grandfather was, of course, in the war. And when he came back, of course, they got married. And they settled at Snyderville. Snyderville used to be quite a town down there. And the Hertzlers had a mill there. And grandfather was a miller, and he run the mill for them. And grandmother worked up the big house.
That was Sheets, right?
Well, of course, grandmother worked up there long before '65, but granddad came back from the army about then, and they settled in Snyderville. Well, according to the story that grandmother has told us time and time again, that there was no robbery. There was no robbery connected with it. That was just supposition. And there was a couple arrested from Urbana, but they turned them loose. But the Shawnee owned all that bottom land down there, and that's where George Rogers Clark put them out. And she always thought that those Indians come back, because old man Hertzler just beat them off the land. That's all there was to it. You can kid yourself, but that's what happened. And they came back, and they are the ones that killed him. And farther, to make it more authentic, they fought around the house. He told Mrs. Hertzler to go upstairs and stay there. Fought around the house for over an hour. And grandmother told us time and time again there was nothing stolen. Absolutely nothing. There was it safe in the fireplace. We know all that. But she told me that after this fight and things quieted down, Mrs. Hertzler came downstairs and everything was in a mess. She went over and got my grandfather, and my grandfather was the first one back to the house. My grandmother said they picked flesh and hair off those ceilings down there for 6 months after. Now that's the way the Shawnee fought.
Yeah.
They just, well, they killed you. If they cut your throat, it takes you 2 hours to die. They tortured you.
Right.
And we've heard that story ever since we were, well, ever since I can remember. Now, nobody listened to us. Oh, we just couldn't tell it. But my cousin has a Bible that was given from the Hertzlers to my grandparents, and it has a family history. So there must be some substance to it.
Where is this Bible? Is it in Springfield?
It's over Troy.
It's in Troy.
Yeah, Oscar Metcalf is his name. And he has the Bible over there. Of course, he has a lot of other things that belong to the family. And grandmother went to live with Jack's, or Oscar's mother. And of course, she took some of the things with her over there. He got some beautiful furniture that grandmother had. And I don't object to it. It's in the family, and that's all we care about.
Well, sure, it's on.
And I go over there once in a while and look at it.
Pat it.
Yeah, but that story, I think is far more authentic if you want to investigate the robbing deal. Because back in those days, they didn't have any courts or anything like that. If they thought somebody robbed somebody, they hung the first tree.
Yeah.
And there was some sacrificial trees down there. They're gone now. The Indians took a sapling and bent it over so that the top of it went in the ground. And then they tied the victim back over the side. It was the type of crucifixion. They tied him over that sapling in that fashion.
On their backs.
But the trees are gone down there now. But they were down there. I've seen them.
By the Hertzler house?
Yeah. But some people didn't know what they were, and they cut the darn things down. It's just one of those things that despair on you.
Yeah, this is...
That's right. But as far as the house is concerned, of course there was people living. I remember when people lived in it, and they didn't change it too much, as near as I can tell. So the house is pretty much the same as it was. And that's safe, still a fireplace if they left it there.
Well, now,
There's no doubt about that.
I was talking to a lady this evening before I came, and she said that one time when they had taken her through the house a number of years ago,
Yeah.
they had showed them, and now it was in the basement, she said.
Yeah.
It was in the fireplace that was in the basement.
Yeah.
And she said they showed it to us, but
Yeah.
she said I've never had anybody, she said I've been through it a couple of times since, and nobody has ever showed them where the
I talked to the editor of the news several years ago, and I told him the story, and I think at that time grandmother was still alive, but they wanted to go along with the sensational stuff, and
Yeah.
they just refused to listen to us. But I know very well that mother or grandmother knew what she was talking about.
Well,
She just had to.
I can go along and relate with the story that these Indians did come back because they had the patience of Job.
Oh,
They
sure.
would wait for years.
Well,
Years.
down here where the sewer,
Plant is?
yeah, down there was cliffs down there,
Yeah.
and my uncle lived in a big old stone house down there, and there was Indian lived back of him in a cave, 2 Indians.
Yeah, there's caves.
Now, hell, I remember them. I
Yeah.
can't talk to them.
Yeah.
And that has, I was a kid. I suppose it's been probably 70 years ago, but I can remember it as plain as day. But the Indians, in my opinion, certainly got a raw deal. I think it's just a crime the way we treat the Indians. I mean,
Did you know that Charles Anthony would get up down in Springfield and preach on taking care of the Indians and how we were treating them so badly? Flip's got some records of the different times when he got up and spoke.
well, I've traveled a lot in the West, and I think the worst thing is, and all religions did it. They took the Indian children from their parents, you know, and put them in these so-called schools. Well, the Indian had a culture of his own, and he had a religion of his own. And I don't think his religion was too far off. But nonetheless, I can't see any reason why they should take their children from them. And then, well, they didn't restrict them from getting liquor or anything like that. That was the worst thing they could do, drink liquor. But I don't know. I just can't understand why we treat them so badly. And of course, they shot all the buffalo and starved. All they could do was starve to death.
Oh, yeah.
George Washington Clark, we think, is a hero. I don't know whether he's a hero or not. I know he burned a lot of corn around here to starve to death.
Yeah.
But this story that we've had, and if you get a hold of Oscar Metcalf over there, Troy, and by the way, Oscar
I will.
was secretary of the Hobart Corporation. He retired from there just about 4 or 5 years ago. He was the only one in the Hobart organization that wasn't a Hobart. He was secretary for years and years and years. He's a pretty sharp little cookie. I know where the house is, and I go over quite often, but I don't remember his address. It's Oscar Metcalf. He was mayor of Troy for a while.
That'll be no problem.
And you just tell him what I was told you, what I've told you, or who, that you talk to me, and he'll get out the book and all that stuff, because he loves it.
Yeah, I think it belongs. It needs to be put into print.
Well, I think it does. Don't get me wrong. Some of the details, of course, it's second-handed with me. It'd be second-handed with Jack, but there must be some substance to it.
I have never yet heard a story, but what? Someplace down in it is the truth. Maybe
Okay.
over the years it has either stretched it or they have taken away, but
Okay.
your main substance is usually the truth.
Well, I can tell you my grandparents were old-fashioned German, and truth was the foundation of everything they did, and that's all there was to it. I know they couldn't have fabricated any story like that. I'm
No.
positive of it.
No.
And Granddad was a miller. He run a mill before he came into Springfield, where 68 goes across down there on the creek. Where Buck Creek comes in down there by the new plant.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a mill down there. He run that for a while. And then he came into town, built his house, and he was a darn good carpenter. So he went from there. But Granddad died in about 1912 or 13, but I remember him just like yesterday. But grandmother lived to about 1938 or 39. And they're both buried down at the Eden Cemetery. It's easy to check the dates on it. But Eden Cemetery is full of my people.
Now,
And I've got a lot down there.
did I understand right that when Mr. Hertzler was killed, that Mrs. Hertzler came to your grandparents' home for help?
Well, grandmother worked there at the time, and Granddad worked for him. Now that I know.
They worked for him.
Yeah. See, Granddad run the mill for him over at Sniper.
Yeah, yeah.
And grandmother worked for him as a maid during the war, and then she still continued to work for him after Granddad got back. And they lived on her for quite a while. Yeah. And even after Mr. Hertzler got killed, she still worked for him. Well, there wasn't many other people to work for.
No,
They had the money.
Yeah. Well, now, I was talking to Susie, which is a genealogist, And she tells me that the Hertzler's books, where he did business, is at the Historical Society, along with his will papers, this sort of thing, are all down, they've got them all down there at the Historical Society. Yeah, all of Hertzler's, I'll call them what they call day books, his people that he loaned money to, his records, financial records, they're all down there.
Well, Oscar has, I'm talking about Oscar Metcalf over in Troy now.
Okay.
He has quite a few things because, as I said, grandmother went to live with my aunt, and he has quite a few things over there that grandmother had, and it's as good a place I know for him to stay. I'm not going to argue with him
Yeah.
because it's in the family.
Oh, sure.
The Bible and that one table I was telling you about was cherry. And when I'd go to see my grandmother over there, she read the Bible a lot. And she had a pair of glasses with the little tiny lenses on them. She only wore them to read. And I'd go in there and those would be laying like that on that Bible, on that table. That's where he's got it. And he usually has two candles on, one on each side.
Oh, I think that's great.
So, and he's a nut on antiques and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, I'll make a trip over there and
But
talk to him. Goodness.
there must be something to this story. There just has to be. I don't believe the story that
Do you have any
robbers
pictures?
come in there and killed him at all.
Do you have any pictures of your grandmother or grandfather?
Yeah.
Do you?
Grandmother lived out there they lived, I don't know how long grandmother worked for them now, but she must have started work when she was 11 or 12 years old. Of course, they did that in those
Oh,
times.
yeah. Now, does this Metcalf, would he have pictures of your grandmother and grandfather?
I think he does have.
Okay.
I had some of my grandfather, and it's just like everything else. Things like that, they get thrown out sometimes, so I don't have anymore. But if I'd see him today, I'd remember him.
Yeah.
And he was a violinist. Well, they called him a fiddler nowadays. The
Oh.
old square dances.
I know now.
Yeah.
I've run across that name with a musician.
Yeah.
He was with the Hawken Band.
Yeah.
He played in the Hawken Band, and I've got a picture of that Hawken Band.
Yeah, they're right.
Yeah.
Well, he
Didn't
could
they
fiddle.
Didn't they work out the R&M?
You're-
Didn't some of them work out the R&M?
Yeah.
They worked with my father,
Yeah, is that
Bill
right?
DeGroot,
Oh,
out the R&M.
well, anyway,
He would make
Granddad was a darn good mechanic. And, of course, when they had these square dances, they had beer, a lot of it. And one time, I remember I was a little kid, and I still remember, I always went and sat on his knee when he was stumping away and playing the violin. They'd take me and lay me down on the bed, and I would already hit, and I'd get up and come back and sit on his knee again. I remember it now. There's no two ways about it. But anyway, one night he got too much beer. I was a little tiny kid, and he fell on his violin and broke it up. I cried all week. By the end of the week, he'd put the violin back together again, and he was fiddling the next Saturday night. So he was a pretty good mechanic.
I guess so.
Oh, it sure sounds like it. My goodness.
He sounds like an interesting man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Well, maybe I haven't told you anything, but I don't like this story that's been in the newspaper too many years. It isn't true.
Well, this is what we were talking to them coming over, the stories that they have got out there that they're telling the public. They say that he was shot with a gun. But sure, maybe the Indian shot him. But that ain't all they apparently did.
Well, okay.
Because why would there be hair and skin and stuff on the ceiling.
Well, that's right. And grandmother told me that I don't know how many times. It was one of those things that she was upset that the newspapers had this sensational story, and according to her, it just wasn't true, and she was mad about it because I told you before, those little people they believed in truth, and they really believed it. They didn't stretch it or nothing like that. And I don't know. Maybe she was off a little bit, but I still think she knew what she was talking about.
What'd your grandmother do after this happened?
Well, grandmother wasn't there now.
Well, I mean, she was working for them, though.
Well, when Mrs. Hertzler brought Granddad up there, well, of course they saw what a mess he was in, and they did everything they could, thinking they could revive him. Of course, they couldn't. He was dead. And then they went around to the different neighbors there, got together, and tried to clean the place up. But that was about the extent of it. He was dead, period. But he must have been in a horrible shape. And I know grandmother used to repeat that about picking that stuff off the ceiling. And I don't think she made it up.
No, there's something like that you would.
No, I don't believe it. And she insisted nothing was ever stolen. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And being a maid as long as she was there, she'd certainly know.
What was there and what wasn't.
Yeah.
Did Mrs. Hertzler just live at the house then after he was killed?
Well, of course, when she was younger, she probably did part of the time. But of course, when Granddad came back from the war, they lived over in Sniperville. And there was a bridge across Bad River down there that went to Snyderville. It's been going for years.
Yeah, the old covered bridge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And they lived right around the corner. It was a real nice house. But whether the house is still standing, I don't know. I haven't been back in there for years and years and years.
But did Mrs. Hertzler stay at the house?
Yeah.
After he was killed?
How old was he when they killed him?
Now, I'm not sure about that end of it, but I think that family Bible would tell you some of those things because there would be quite a few facts in there.
Well, that Bible would be fun to see.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, they had, they raised 3 children, and I think there was 3 died. One of them fell in a scalding tub of water and died. But that wasn't now the ordinary nose days, because they heated the water in a big, like a big kettle, and a mischievous child could easily fall in it. And they're buried down in Enum. Of course, Uncle Frank, he was out in California. But Dad's buried down there, and practically all the rest of them buried down there.
Are there any Hertzler generations?
That Enum Cemetery is a historical society.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard that.
And there's another cemetery down there, too, Angel Cemetery.
It was the first cemetery
Yeah.
down there.
There used to be a road run right past that motel, west of the motel, a road went back there.
Yeah. What they're trying to do now, Susie was telling me just this evening
Yeah.
that she was to a meeting this past week, and they're trying to get the township trustees to build that road back again so people can get back into that cemetery. No, you have to walk back to it.
I was looking for my great-grandfather Sheets, and I finally found him over in York County. He had moved over there, and he died over there. But all his boys, and they're down in Indian Cemetery. Old Dave Sheets down there, he lived to be, I think, 102. Now, he's buried down there.
Who is that now?
David Sheets.
David Sheets.
And he's up, well, there's a soldier's mound up there, and he is, and his family are buried east of it. It's near the east side of the cemetery. Granddad and grandmother, as you go in, the first road runs east and west. And they're buried off of the second road back from the east. And they're to the left of it. And just on the other side is the old Revolutionary War over there.
Now, I've been working on an Egger, who's a gunsmith, and he lived in Bethel Township. And when he died, and about 2 years later his wife died, and there was a Sheets that was made guardian of the children. Do you suppose that had been any of your
Oh
family?
yeah, we're related to all the Sheets down there. There was a rack of them.
Okay. But
See, there was 5 boys of the original family that came here, and they were all. That means there was a lot of our names. Of course, we were related to everybody around Enid down there eventually.
there was 5
Because
boys.
Enid wasn't very dark big.
No, there was 5 boys.
Well, old Adam, I remember him very well, and Sam, and of course Henry was my grandfather. I don't remember the other two's names, but they're buried down there.
Well, Susie has done that cemetery
Yeah.
down there.
Oh, that's a beautiful
I
cemetery.
know it is.
And there's Revolutionary War buried down there. It's right across from where my granddad and grandmother buried.
We used to live down there.
Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing about Uncle Sam, Sam went through the war and came back, and he didn't get a scratch. Well, neither did my grandfather. Of course, he was in artillery. But anyway, he used a drawing knife, and he cut his knee right here on the kneecap, and that made that knee stiff, and he always walked with a limp. But right after the state was built, I was talking about the movie theater now.
After what?
The state.
Oh,
The
okay.
state theater.
Okay.
We went down and got Uncle Sam, and he fought in the Battle of Gettysburg. We brought him up here. He'd never read the picture show before, I don't believe. But anyhow, we walked in. Of course, it was dark in there. And the first thing he said, who turned off the GG lights? Everybody started to laugh, and we went down and sat down. And after the battle proceeded, he was telling what was wrong with the battle. It didn't happen that way at all. And it finally got to the point where nobody was watching the screen. They were listening to it. I'll never forget that. I'll live being
Good.
But he was a character. Yes, he was a character.
Now, you know that you can send to the War Department and get both of these gentlemen's history of the battles they fought in and their tickets and all that. Did you know that?
Yeah, we did. We had some of those records around here, but the kids, when they left, well, they won some of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. But
How many children do you have?
oh, and I had a couple. That was funny.
Yeah. What are their names?
Well, one is Lowell. Lowell W. He
Okay.
lives in Tupelo, Mississippi. And the other's named Dolores, and she's a school teacher out here on the east side of town.
What is her
last
last name?
name's Bittman.
What is it?
Bittman.
Mittman?
Yeah.
Is that the Mittmans out of Enid?
Yeah, the father lived out there, and
No, we knew the Mittmans when we lived out there.
yeah, no, they lived there for a long time.
Yeah.
Russell, he would work for the Edisons all his life.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I worked for the Edisons.
Oh. Their daughter, I think, is living over at Buckeye Lake, isn't she?
She used to. I think they've moved out west now.
Well, no wonder. couldn't
I
find
haven't
her.
kept track of them, but I believe they live in Arizona.
Yeah.
The daughter.
The last time we talked to her, she was living over at Buckeye
Well, of
Lake.
course, they might be.
But that's been.
Actually, we weren't too close. Of course, I knew Ruby.
Yeah.
He worked for the Edison too.
Yeah.
And he was foreman, and I was foreman substitute. He was foreman line department. That's where I spent my time over there, fooling around with high voltage. But if you go over there and see Oscar Metcalf, he won't be hard to find. He lives over on the west side. And I'm positive he'd be more than happy to tell you.
Okay. Well, I'd kind of like to get it straightened out. I think
Yeah.
we talked to Floyd Barman, who is the Historical Society right now, and he was all excited. He wanted to come with us, but he's working on that fair out there at the Boston out there this weekend, and he couldn't come with us tonight. So.
Well, as I say, I think it's a crime we mistreated the Indians as we did.
Oh.
Of course, Meriwether Lewis is buried down on the Natchez Trace. You know, I've been to his grave down there. Natchez. The trace isn't quite completed yet, but there's a lot of it. It's a beautiful, beautiful drive down across Mississippi and on down to pretty close to Natchez.
Yeah. Jim's been down there.
Yeah.
But we've never been there.
And, well, the nice thing about it, all along the trace, they call it a parkway, and they don't allow any trucks on. No signs or outside, you know, well, they have signs on telling about the various villages you go past, but there's no billboards or anything like that. It's a parkway. And part of the old trace is still there. You go out and walk on it.
Oh, neat.
And Mother Lewis is off to the right as you go down, and they have quite a park up in there where he's buried. They've got a statue of him. But as you go along, they laid out the trace almost where the original trace was. The original trace was crooked. And this goes back and forth. It's much straighter than the original trace. But all along, things had happened, which it was a very old trace, you know. The French used it, the Indians used it, and well, they even lay out the villages of some of the Indian tribes down there. But one place, near one of these villages, which is near Tupelo, Mississippi, there was a creek one away from it, and you could walk up a path up that creek. And they had everything labeled as the Indian used that particular thing, whether it's a shrub or a tree or just about everything you think of as you went up there. It was very interesting. I went up about 2 miles, got tired, and came back. But those Indians, they didn't use wigwams. They used lodges.
Yeah.
And they were oval shaped.
Right.
With the opening coming in such a fashion